Hey guys, it's Brian with UFO Book Review. I'm back with another review for you today. Now you're probably thinking when you saw the title of this video that you already saw a review on this book from me. You're right, you did, but I am redoing my review and I'll tell you why in just a moment. But I want to talk about AD, After Disclosure, The People's Guide to Life After Contact. This book is written by Richard Dolan and Bryce Zabel. And if you're wondering why I'm redoing a review, I spent some time thinking about my last review and the book in general. And after commenting with dialoguing with some people, and I've watched my video a couple times since then over the last week or two since I made my video, and I realized that I think I was too harsh and overly critical and unnecessarily so. So I want to redo the review, so I'm really hoping that you guys will afford me the opportunity to do this and that you'll understand why I'm doing this. And I'll explain a little bit more at the end, but let me just hop right into the review. Again, this is AD After Disclosure, and as you can see, the book, it's not a tiny book. It's I think it's about 320 pages or so, 310, 320, somewhere in that range. There's no pictures in this book, but it's not a difficult book to read. I don't think, if you're not an avid reader, I think you'll still be okay with this book. It's not a difficult read. Now, if you go and find any reviews on this book, you're going to find highly favorable reviews for the most part. Now, my last review, like I said, I was overly harsh and just too critical, unnecessarily so. So today what I want to focus on is more positive aspects of the book, and then near the end I'll tell you one or two things that I don't like about the book, and then I'll wrap it up. So basically this book starts off with a very intriguing, interesting opening scene. It's the opening chapter is day one. The President of the United States of America is standing up at a press conference, and he is beginning the disclosure process. Now this opening chapter I think is really fantastic, and it really just piqued my interest for what was to come. Now something they discuss in this book, which you will find is rather unique to this book. While after the first chapter they go into history, I think they do history for 2 chapters following the opening chapter. They go into history for about the last 60 years, and I completely failed to mention in my last video that the information contained is probably some of the most compelling evidence for UFOs out there that you're likely to find in any book. And if you simply just read the chapters of history in here, you would be blown away by the cases that are so well documented, and you would think to yourself, man, why have I never heard this before? Now, one reason I think in my last review I just kind of really bashed the history section of this was because I had just come off a UFO book marathon, let's call it. I read 6, this was my 7th book that I read back to back to back to back. I read 4 in 1 week, and then the following 3 the following week. So I think by the time I got to this book, I was a bit bogged down and almost a bit brain dead. Well, yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, I had so much information in here that, but it was really difficult to impress me by this point. So, but I gotta say, I have to look at this and say, you know what? The information contained in the history is extremely valuable. And if you find another book that doesn't have those kind of histories, you got to question the book you're reading, because it's like, what source are they using? But this is some of the most valuable information in ufology that you'll find, the cases that they use here. Another thing they do fairly well is they analyze the information. You know, it's one thing to talk about a UFO, it's another thing to analyze it and to forecast, and they have this idea in this book that is unique to this book, and that is the idea of a breakaway civilization. In other words, how is it that for the last 6 decades or so, UFOs have been out there, and somebody's had knowledge of this, but how is it that they've been able to keep it secret? What measures have they taken to keep this idea secret? So they analyze this, and they expound upon that, and that is an idea that you will find that's unique to this book. Now, I do think that other books, they may hint at the idea of a breakaway civilization. Now, they don't call it that. It's going to be termed something different, but I think there are other people that think, hey, somebody's controlling the information, but they don't attempt to devote a whole book to a group that's that's keeping the information from being disclosed. Okay, so they do cover that quite well, and I did not mention that at all in my first review. I just did not mention that. So that's a positive thing about the book. Now, as far as the disclosure itself, they basically have this idea that disclosure in and of itself is impossible, but it's inevitable. It can't happen, but it must happen. Now, it sounds kind of like a dichotomy of terms, but it's not. And when you read, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But basically, when they get into disclosure, and that's basically the revealing of this information, it's not going to be, most likely, it would be impossible for it to just all come at once. I mean, it would have to come in stages, because you have to realize that this information has been kept secret for so long, under lock and key. Who knows how many thousands of pages and documents, and I mean, it's just an incredible amount of information that will slowly be revealed as newspapers and different reporters get onto the, at one point they're kind of criticizing anybody that talks about a UFO, but when disclosure happens, they're going to kind of switch teams, and they're all for UFOs at this point, of course. But disclosure will be a gradual process, and they do talk about in this book how it's going to affect us individually. Each person, that's possibly the first aspect of disclosure, will be how it affects us individually. And then the second part of disclosure, I think I'm getting the order correct here, but the second part of disclosure will be more how it affects us as a community, as a civilization. So they talk about how disclosure will affect religion, how it's going to affect science, how it's going to affect technology, how it's going to affect history, like what you learn in school. All those things are going to have to change. History books will have to be rewritten. Musicians are going to write new songs, I mean, the world is going to change. Financially, globally, politically, everything is going to change. And so they do the best they can. I think they've done a good job in that, in addressing many different issues that perhaps most of us have not thought of. And I didn't, like I said, I was too harsh in my first review. And I think in my first review, part of the problem I had was the history that they included, like I mentioned earlier. But again, I was on an information overload, and I've had a little bit more time to reflect. And what I am telling you is, again, the information they contain in the history is fantastic. It really is. Did I care for it when I was reading it? No, because I was bogged down. Did I understand that it was important? Yes. Did I fail to mention that in my last video? Yes. Now, you may say, he's had a change of heart. He loves the book and he's going to give it 5 stars and tell everyone to buy it. That's not what I'm saying, okay? I'm still saying I have a couple issues with the book. One issue that I have, I just need to say this, but at the same time I realize why it's the way it is to me the book has an unusual flow to it. The opening scene is almost cinematic. I mean, you kind of feel like you're watching a movie or a television show, or maybe even you're sitting there yourself. So it's very cinematic. It's like it's happening. It's live. And then it goes into this analysis of 6 decades of ufology. And then it changes to more of kind of like almost, it seems as if it changes to kind of more of a discussion. Like it's almost, I don't know, the best way to describe that is if you were to sit down with a couple buddies and you're just talking about things and someone's happening to record the conversation. In a normal flow of conversation, things aren't necessarily linear. And like in the history part of this book, it's very linear and it's very analytical, makes a lot of sense. When they get into the more theoretical stuff, like they're forecasting, they're having to use knowledge that they have previously to kind of forecast what it might be in the future. And that is a difficult task, I must say. I think it would be very difficult. So the flow of the book kind of changes to me. You've got the cinematic opening scene, then it goes into this analytical, historical construct, and then it changes to more, the flow is more like a conversation, a discussion. And that really bothered me my first read through, and again at the time, brain overload. But while I still don't necessarily like the way it flows like that, at the same time I can see that it may be inevitable. I mean, I don't know how else you could write it really. And I've been thinking about this all morning, really. I've been thinking, man, how could you make the flow different? And I really don't know that you can. So that's my biggest fault of the book, is I don't personally like the way that flows. I like things that are a little bit more linear, more straightforward and analytical. That's why those opening chapters are great. But yeah, so my first review, like I said, was just really overly harsh and critical, and unnecessarily so. And I think that, oh, you know what? I want to mention this. I'm looking at the back of the book. This book was reviewed by Nick Pope, the former chief of the UK Ministry of Defense. Stan Lee, the creator of Spider-Man. He's looked at the book. Edgar Mitchell as an astronaut. So I mean, it's been looked at by some very well-known people, and they seem to really enjoy the book. So I just felt like I really needed to make another review to kind of give you guys a more accurate picture of what's really in this book. Now again, am I saying I love the book and you must buy it? No. But am I saying there's a lot of positive things in this book? Yes. They do some groundbreaking stuff in here. I mean, they do. I mean, you're not going to really find another book that's as well researched and thought out as this one. So I'm going to have to change my initial star rating system is from a 1 to 5. And my first time around, I gave this a 3 out of 5, and then I said maybe even a 2.5. I just was really bashing the book. I don't know. Maybe I slept on the wrong side of the bed that morning. I don't know. And I went back and watched all my other reviews, and I realized, man, I had rated this one the lowest out of all the books I read. And again, after I reflected about it more, that's simply not the case. This is not the worst one that I read, by no means. It's just, I don't know what it is. So I apologize for saying that. I'm hoping that you guys will see some more positive things in this book, and that maybe you'll check it out for yourselves. I mean, don't take my word for it. A lot of people love this book. There's some great stuff in there, especially if this is your first exposure to UFOs. I think you'll really like this book. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, okay? I still have that issue with the flow, but again, I just don't know how else you can do it. But that could just be a unique issue that I have, and no one else seems to notice that. So in any case, this is AD After Disclosure, The People's Guide to Life After Contact, Richard Dolan and Bryce Zabel. My next book I'm gonna be doing is Witnessed by Bud Hopkins. I think this was written in like 1996. In any case, I'm about a third of the way through with this one, so I'm hoping by next week, Monday or Tuesday or so, something like that, I'll have this review for you. And in any case, yeah, so check out AD Life After Disclosure, or AD After Disclosure, that is. I'll put a link in the doobly-doo below, and that'll take you to Amazon. You can check it out for yourself. In any case, guys, I want to thank you for watching. I hope you'll tune in next time. Take care.